The Knicks and the Nets, they're going to continue their battle for New York City as they face off for the second time this season on Monday night. So let's preview the matchup. We're going to do it with the host of the Bleav in Nets podcast. His name is Thomas Leuthner, and he joins me now. Tom, what's going on, man? How you doing?
What's going on, Dex? Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited. Another nice matchup in New York we got going on here today.
Yeah, we got another matchup here, too. Two teams kind of on different ends right now, Tom, because the Nets, they now sit at 3-12 on the season. So let me ask you this. When you look at the Nets, and I think Knicks fans looking at this will find this interesting, from your perspective, what does their 15-game start say about where this franchise is right now and then how they're approaching this season under Jordi Fernandez, who's in his second year as head coach there in Brooklyn?
Well, I think that we're seeing something that's a little interesting, right? And the Nets are trying to build up their reputation, their foundation, and really work on who's going to be the star of this team, who is the best player, because that's something I've gotten into. And I think that you look at this team, you look at the stats, and obviously everybody thinks that MPJ is the best player on this team because he looks like it and he shoots like it and he's the primary ball handler, most of the time. But I think that they're just trying to build up who they really are. And it's hard to find that because, like you said, Jordi's a younger coach. He's a guy who's 2 years in. He's playing with a team of a bunch of 20-year-olds. I don't think there's anybody that's over 30 on the roster yet. The only guy you have up there is Terrence Mann. So with this short stint that we've seen so far, I think that we've come to realize that the Nets are in a rebuild. And, I'm not going to say the T word, and I'm not going to go ahead and sit there and solidify what they're going to do, but they are trying to win games. And I think that, like I said, it comes down to the identity of the team. What is this team? Who are they going to be in the future? What is going to be the lineup rotation and everything in between? The one guy we've been seeing a lot of in Jordi's game plan is Tyrese Martin, and I think that Jordi wants to make him a little bit more than what we've seen from him. In the last couple of games, actually, he's had a very good stretch, but I think Jordi's looking to get more out of him. So I think that in the first few games, it's just identity. Who is this team? What are they all about? What are they going to do come February in the deadline? But that's what we've seen through these first 15 games. There's not this huge sample size of all these guys where you're looking at a veteran. Like I said, Terrence Mann's the oldest guy in the roster, I Bleav. MPJ is a guy who you've known what he's been able to do when he's been the second or third option on a team, and that was with the Denver Nuggets. But you're seeing what he's able to do now as a primary ball handler, as a guy who they're asking more of, and that is being able to get assists, being able to carry this team when they do win games, which hasn't been much. But like you said, they're on the opposite side of what the Knicks are on. And I think that if they do find their true identity and they solidify what they really want to do rather than attempting to compete, they'll be in a way better position than they have been the first few games.
Yeah, and essentially, I'm glad you were able to not use the T word there. Try to avoid using the T word there. That is good. You saying that made me think of this. How much of what we're seeing on the floor with the Nets comes down to growing pains under a young coach in Jordi Fernandez, still, as you just mentioned, trying to install a system, and then how much of it is about a roster that just doesn't have enough talent or experience to compete night to night? How much of it is, both sides of this when you look at this Nets team?
Well, I want to say it's 50-50, right? And if I could say it's 100-100, I would say that because that's really what it is. I think that Jordi has been struggling when it comes to a player development coach. Like I said, they are in the midst of a rebuild. They're a team that has to figure out what they do want. They don't have the talent to compete, and I think that we know that, but they do have a core, right? And you look at what's going to happen in the next few years, right? Right now, they're solidified to get a pick that's going to be in the top 5, and they have, I think, personally, if you keep MPJ and you keep Nick Claxton and keep Yegor Dioman, those 3 guys are the foundation of this team, and I think Jordi has to realize that. So when you have a young coach who doesn't know how to use these specific players yet, when you have weapons, but you don't have enough to compete. So especially in the Eastern Conference that's weaker, if you give yourself 2 years of allowing Jordi to really identify what he wants to do with this team, and you give them that 2 years of signing the right veterans, getting the draft picks that you want and you need, or trading up in the draft to something that you want to get, then you'll be in a better position. But like I said, it's a 50-50 split right now. You're in a position where this coach doesn't know how to approach this team yet, and you're in a position where the talent's not there. You do have a young talent, but when you don't have a guy over 30 years old, there's nothing you could really do with that yet. So, it's a 50-50 split. Like I said, if I could say it was 100-100, I would 100% say that.
It's a lot of hundreds there. I like that, though. I like that. There's a lot of hundreds there. The thing is, I think when you when you think about this Nets team, right? You think about teams, I'm going to use the R word, not the T word, but teams that are trying to rebuild. Fans are looking for hope. So when you look at this current Nets roster, who's a young player that fans can reasonably get excited about right now? Is it a Noah Clowney because he's got some defensive upside? Is it, Jaeger Dielman? Is it somebody else that is on this roster who might be showing some flashes to fans and the coaching staff of being part of the long-term core? Who's that guy that you feel like Nets fans can say, okay, that's the guy we can get excited about going out to see?
Well, I would love to say MPJ and Nick Claxton, but we know what they're all about, right?
Right.
And like you brought up Noah Clowney, who I really like. I think that he's a very good player, but I think that you see him in spurts, right? He's a defensive guy who can score here and there, but in some games he's non-existent. Some games he's going to go. I Bleav in the Raptors game, he went 0 for 5 from the three-point line, so you can't get that. I think if there's one player who you have to stay patient with, but you should be excited about, it's Jaeger Dielman, right? And I think that there's a lot of people who are calling him a bust when you were 10 games into the season, and there's nothing you can do about that because one, he's a playmaking point guard that likes to shoot threes. I think that Jordi is expecting too much out of him when it comes to attempting to change his game. He's a guy who wants to shoot. If I have a 6'8" point guard who really can pass the ball, he can make plays, but he's also a knockdown shooter, I'm going to let him play his game. I'm going to be patient with him, and that's the thing. And you're not wasting anybody's prime right now. It's not like Michael Porter Jr. is this Nikola Jokic or this Giannis Antetokounmpo where if you don't get it done in 3 years, you're not doing anything with it. You have time with this roster. So if you're patient enough and you really, go into the game thinking the right thing, and when you're watching as a fan and you really break down what Jaeger Dielman is doing during the games, he is so exciting to watch. And I know it's not this guy who's dunking on people. And if you want to give the exciting upside, it's Zaire Williams, in my opinion, who can just, finish at the rim. He could shoot a little bit. But if I'm going to say you guys have to be confident in one person going down the stretch, and I could always be wrong. Anybody could be wrong. But in my opinion, it's Jaeger Dielman. He was the top pick for a reason. He's the first guy they took a chance on. I think that Drake Powell's also up there. I think the defensive ability as well as the athleticism. 2 games ago, he stole a little outlet pass and takes it down himself, finishes at the rim both hands. Nice dunk. I think that he has the dual athleticism and defensive abilities. But if Jaeger Dielman could pick it up defensively and you allow him to play his game and you're really patient with him, then I think that he's the guy that you should be most excited for.
All right, Tom. So when you look at this team, what do you think should be the priority for the rest of the season? Is it simply player development and draft position? It's not using the T word there. Or do you still think the Nets can build an identity that carries meaning into next year?
No, I think that it is. It's really working on your player development and your position in the draft, because that is the most important thing, especially when you see a team like the Thunder right now who have the rights to so many different teams' picks, and there's a chance that they pick in the top 5 if the Clippers don't turn this around. So I think you have to worry about that. And I think you have to worry about where you're going to draft, because you do want one of these top 3 guys. And there's a lot of teams competing for that right now. When it comes down to player development, I think that Jordi needs to figure out how to really just let players play their own game. And I was able to have a conversation with a couple people, and the one thing I was saying is Cam Thomas, when he does play, and obviously he's injured right now, he's a scorer. He is a guy who's going to get to his mid-range spot whenever he comes off a screen. He comes off the screen very tight. So and who knows how long he's going to be on this Nets team. But the one thing that I want to take away from this situation specifically, Cam Thomas is a guy who just wants to score. If he's going to come off a screen tight and take a mid-range shot, let him take that mid-range shot. Jordi's whole game plan right now is making players do more than what they already do, which I understand if you want to expand their game. But if you're telling Cam Thomas to take threes, and instead of just taking the mid-range that he would just normally take, he's taking step-back three-pointers that aren't going in because he's not set, then you have to work on just allowing players to be themselves, right? Another prime example of this, Jaeger Dielman, a guy who, like I said, he's a three-point sniper. The guy wants to shoot from the three-point line. He wants to be the guy who you can rely on from when it comes to shooting outside of MPJ. And the whole thing within the first 5 games was, well, we want to see him score from other parts of the floor, which I understand. But if you're taking a shot on this guy so early in the draft, you have to learn how to just let him play his game. You have a three-point shooter in Michael Porter Jr., so it's not like that's your biggest worry in the world. You don't have to worry about this guy not being able to shoot threes. MPJ is going to be your scorer. Most of the time it's going to MPJ. Now, what I like Yegor to be able to score over smaller defenders closer to the rim, sure. But I'm not understanding the point of trying to make him into this mid-range scorer. If you want him to get to the block and take a shot over, a smaller guard, but guys by the names of Jalen Brunson, Trae Young, he's 6'8". I understand that. But if you're going to try to get him to the mid-range, it's not that kind of game anymore. A guy that perfected that kind of game was Sean Livingston. And it's not that NBA anymore. Although it worked, the difference was you had Steph Curry and Klay Thompson on the other side of that. So when you hit, when you go out and hit 10 mid-range shots in that game, you have a guy who's hitting 10 three-pointers behind you. The Nets don't have that. So you have to let players develop a little bit on their own, but you have to coach them in the way that they want to be coached rather than what you think is right. Because right now, like we were saying, there's no identity going into next year. So work on the development. Build your core around Nick Claxton, MPJ, Yegor Dioman. The only thing that I would say needs to change for one of those star players, I guess you would say, is I would love to see Nick Claxton expand his game a little bit, just because we're also not in the traditional center role where you're finishing at the rim every single time and it's going to work. Does it work for some role centers? Like we'll see, in this game with Mitchell Robinson, it works for him because you have Karl-Anthony Towns backing him up. So I would love to see Nick Claxton be able to catch the ball at the free throw line, turn around, and when a defender is letting him shoot the ball. He could shoot. We've seen it before. He has a nice mid-range jumper. So if you're able to really develop a guy like Claxton to his full potential, you let Dioman develop the way that he wants to. He's also super young, and you keep the MPJ, that MPJ playmaking, MPJ alive as well as scoring. I think that's what you have to focus on, as well as your draft position, because if you have those three solidified and Drake Powell's able to be this defensive guy, Noah Clowney's able to be this defensive guy, work on his scoring a little bit, and you're getting a top pick, you're in a 10 times better position than in next year's season than you are 15 games into this season.
Right. And then once that is done, then you could think about next year and then working on the identity and developing that as you go further. It makes a lot of sense to me. All right, last thing for me. Last time the Nets faced the Knicks earlier this month, it was all New York. The Knicks, they recorded a 134 to 98, not 198. That'd be a whole lot of points. 134 to 98 victory. When you look at this matchup against the Knicks for the Nets, what do you think will be the key matchups to keep an eye on in terms of individuals in this game?
Well, you didn't have to bring up the score. I remember the game. Unfortunately,
man.
I had to watch the Nets get dominated. But no, I think there's a few, and I think that the Knicks playing two bigs with Mitch and Cat makes it a little bit harder for the Nets. But I do think that there's going to be a world where Cat and MPJ go at it because OG's not there. And I know that he's not the best defensive player in the world, Cat, but we'll probably see MPJ guard Cat here and there. I know that Clowney's probably going to be on him majority of the game. So that is a matchup I would like to see if somehow the Nets are able to make that matchup work, because I do think that MPJ could take advantage of that matchup with not having a guy like OG there. We'll probably see Hart guarding MPJ. We'll probably see McHale guarding MPJ. But if the Nets somehow make that matchup work where they get Cat to switch on to MPJ, I would love that. The other thing I would love to see, and I know we saw a little bit of it, but I think that we're seeing, Yegor Dioman get more comfortable in the position that he's at now. So I'm excited to see him versus Brunson. I think that it could be a good matchup. I think that, like I said, if you're going to get Yegor to really advance his game and make a name for himself, it's going to be on smaller defenders, and Brunson's a smaller defender. Now, do the Knicks throw Mikal Bridges at him and Josh Hart at MPJ? Possibly, but if we're able to see that point guard on point guard matchup, the good thing about the matchup realistically for the Nets is that you have to just go one-on-one. Your position's going to be one-on-one. So I would like to see Yegor's game advance a little bit defensively and be able to guard a smaller guard in Jalen Brunson. Maybe we see Terrence Mann take over that role a little bit. But I think that's my prime matchup. Just the prime matchup of Yegor versus Brunson. Like I said, if you're able to get MPJ and Karl-Anthony Towns on each other, but also the defensive abilities of Mitchell Robinson against the offensive abilities of Nick Claxton, I think could be a great matchup, because you're seeing traditional center versus traditional center. You're seeing two guys who are going to finish at the rim. They're both going to play defense at the rim. And I think it's going to come down to, with them two at least, who's going to block more shots, who's going to dunk on each other more. So that's going to be an interesting matchup, just because it's not a matchup that people really traditionally look for. The two guys who are just traditional centers who can't really shoot, not that they can't shoot, but aren't going to shoot, and they're just going to finish at the rim. But I think that could be an aggressive matchup and a little bit of an underlooked matchup in this game, at least.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see Knicks and Nets playing for the second time this season at the Barclays Center on Monday night. Knicks in the middle of a 5-game road trip. Nets 3-12 on the season. Knicks 9-6 on the season. That is Thomas Leuthner. Check him out. Bleav in Nets podcast, a really good one for the Nets fans on here. Tom, I appreciate you coming on with me, not using the T word, being able to preview this matchup. We'll definitely have to do it again. I appreciate you joining me on New York Got Game. Thank you so much, man.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Anytime.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.